Welcome back, everyone, American Constitutionalists. I wish I had some good news for you, but it seems like I don't. Probably should start making a video at least maybe once a day. That's good news. All right, serious face though. So, and one of the biggest attacks and one of the biggest destructions towards the First Amendment, right to free speech, and the government not being able to punish you for using your speech. We now have a bill which says if you misgender someone, or as they call it, dead name someone, that individual can sue you. And they can come for damages ranging from $5,000 to $50,000. Also, what they attacked on is a little bit additional extra, is they interfered and they encroached into the family court section, which, if anyone is vaguely familiar with family court right now in the United States, it is a nightmare. It's basically dads get screwed, kids get split apart. They don't get to have an equal visitation time with mom and dad. Their lives are ruined. And a large majority, not all, but very, very well, a large percentage of women abuse it to suit their own needs. Very vindictive or get vengeance against dad. Again, not all women, but it is a fairly decent amount. But more importantly, the family court has decided to insert itself in all families and tear it apart and just absolutely destroy people's lives with absolutely insane levels of financial destruction, mental destruction, so on and so forth. So they dipped in that. Now, how has all this been done? Let's go take a look. So, Colorado Newsline here states heavily amended bill adding legal protections for transgender people passes Colorado Senate. It's interesting. The Kelly Loving Act says intentionally not referring to a transgender person by their chosen name is discriminatory. The Colorado Senate gave final approval Tuesday to a heavily amended bill adding legal protections for transgender people in a 20 to 14 vote after hours of debate and opposition from Republican senators, the Common Sense senators. House Bill 25-1312, dubbed the Kelly Loving Act in honor of a transgender woman killed during the 2022 Club Q shooting in Colorado Springs, would make it a discriminatory act to intentionally not refer to a transgender person by their chosen name. Okay. It also requires school policy. Now, using someone's like, hey, my name is David, and then you call me like Davey or some like to kind of like derogatory name. Yes, that makes sense. But that's not really what they're going for here. Basically, what they're saying is one person can just poof, change their name, and now you must call them that name. And what they're doing is they're slowly just wearing down the First Amendment in Colorado. And by the way, federal law does trump state law. That's the Bill of Rights. Don't get trumped by state law, but unfortunately, it has been trumped by state law because we lack the federal government, or at least the politicians within the federal government, to enforce those type of things. And our Constitution, Bill of Rights, has been slowly watered down, destroyed, and culture has been basically warped to turn against those protections. Anyways, going back to, so what they're doing here is not so much like, oh, they're trying to protect someone for getting teased or whatever. What they're trying to do is now control people's speech to prevent them from being able to say, no, I'm not going to call you that, or no, I'm not going to call you a man when you're a woman, or a woman when you're obviously a man. That's what they're aiming to do here. Let's go a little deeper into it because they're nefarious. Also, like I said, it adds in lots of backdoor ways for certain individuals that use gender identity to take away custody from the other parent. Also gives the ability of the state to take custody away from the parent, and it's slowly eroding away lots of rights across the board. Let's go on this one. It also requires school policy to be inclusive of all reasons that a student changes their name, and says schools must allow students to choose from any variation contained in dress code policies. Now, we recently have a lot of laws being passed, and also a lot of people pushing back against men identifying as women to play in women's sports. There's a lot of pushback against that as well. Simply because these men are completely dominating women's sports. The bill includes a provision that says someone does not need a court order if they want to change their gender marker on a driver's license, or other identification a second or third time. Basically sowing chaos. Colorado allows an X gender marker on state IDs, but that has led to some people having trouble with student loans and passport applications. So some people may want to change their gender markers back. It will also allow a county clerk to issue a new marriage license to someone who has legally changed their name. Let's go to the next article. Who did all this? Who pushed all this stuff? Colorado governor signs law criminalizing dead naming and misgendering in public settings. This article breaks down a little bit more. So pretty much under the new law, courts must treat dead naming and misgendering as forms of coercive control when determining parental custody and visitation rights. Again, who would want to gaslight, coerce, and lie and make the child think that their gender is different than what it actually is? Someone wanting to be abusive. And how can they do that now? By utilizing the courts and saying, hey, court, and anybody who's been involved with the family court system or knows anything a little bit about the court system, family court system, and knows people been in it, knows this happens all the time. That system is corrupt. It's absolute awful. It's really, it's in my mind, it's anti-constitution, but that's a fight for another day. So pretty much, if you wanted to take away custody rights from, let's say, mom or dad, doesn't have to be one or the other, right? All the parent would have to do with primarily the larger amounts of custody, the person who's most able to influence, coerce, and control, manipulate, and gaslight the child, would just get them to believe that the child is opposite gender or they're gender confused, especially if the child is younger and doesn't know any better, and then use that as a weapon against the other parent. Just take away their custodial and visitation rights. Here's another little thing about it. Now, this is something where certain states are trying to get a certain block of voters to stick around and stay and also be seen as a sanctuary state without really not being a sanctuary state. Colorado courts may not enforce out-of-state laws that penalize parents for allowing their children to access gender-affirming health care. Read that again. Colorado courts may not enforce out-of-state laws that penalize parents for allowing their children to access gender-affirming health care. Basically, it's again, parent one wants to control child. Doesn't care what happens to said child, just wants to control. And there's lots of parents like that. So said parent moves to another state, and within that state, they then begin having that child undergo gender-affirming health care, quote unquote, basically pumping them full of hormones, trying to get parts of their body parts surgically removed. And then they use that against the other parents, like, what are you doing to our child? And then use that as, hey, judge, hey, court, Colorado, this parent should not have any more visitation or custody rights because they're trying to harm the child. And it's evil, and it has been done. And there have been the individuals that pushed back against that and said, no, when I was young, I did this, and I realized it was a bad mistake as I got older. Let's go further on it. Education institutions may accommodate chosen names in any policy they adopt, regardless of the reason a student may have. So you see, a lot of this has to do specifically with messing around with underage children, students, and just causing absolute chaos. Now, the other issue with this too is how it also controls adults. Is if someone was to use the wrong name or refer to someone in the wrong way or misgender them, whatever, and that person's like, well, you can't do that. And the person's like, well, I have freedom of speech and I don't believe what you're saying, so yes, I can, and I'm going to. What they're going to do then is then use this law and then sue them or hit them with fines, and pretty huge fines, utilizing the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act. And the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act allows them to basically take it to court and then seek attorney fees and costs and other actual monetary damages and damages for non-economic loss or injury. And I'll get to that in just a second, what it means. Or a statutory fine of $5,000 to $50,000. That's a lot of money. I know most people can't afford $5,000. Never mind $50,000. Again, this is someone utilizing the system, the law system, as a stick to beat someone in submission that they want to control. It has nothing to do with taking care of people, taking care of the health, nothing. This is you being thought controlled and mind controlled under the threat of the state government and huge financial fines in order to make you do something what you do, i.e. violating the Bill of Rights. So, however, the defendant is entitled to a 50% reduction of the cap on the non-economic loss or injury if it corrects the violation within 30 days of the complaint being filed and did not knowingly or intentionally make or cause to be made the violation. Oh, it was just a little mistake. Oh, we'll reduce it by $25,000. You still have to pay $25,000. That is freaking insane. Now, what is a non-economic damage or injury? We'll go over that before we wrap all this up. Non-economic damages compensate for injuries that lack direct financial documentation. They address physical pain, emotional distress, and the disruption of normal life. Now, not like someone getting physically beat, but focus more on the emotional distress and the disruption of normal life. The goal is to recognize the full extent of suffering that cannot be quantified with receipts or pay stubs. Basically saying that this person made me uncomfortable. I felt harassed, blah, 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 because they said I was a man when I was dressed up as a woman and referred to me as Daryl instead of as Darlene. This is a nightmare. And it definitely starts off the beginning of the end of the First Amendment if we don't push back and just say no. People will probably run awry of this, and they'll probably brought to court. And the question is, will they be able to stand up and fight back and then have this go up to higher courts and then knock down? Or if this should just, the state of California, or sorry, well, state of California too, because they do some shenanigans. State of Colorado sued and then have this law wiped off. I don't know. I certainly think it should be wiped off. Never should have been brought up to their House of Representatives or voted in their House at all. It's absolutely garbage, and it is 100% violating our First Amendment Bill of Rights. All right, let me know what you all think, and we'll see you next time.